Welcome back. It's now time to go in depth. Billionaire business mogul Donald Trump clinched power to become U.S. 45th president. It was perhaps the most controversial presidential elections to date. Some of Trump's most fervent proclamations were arguably on immigration. However, he did not seem to focus too much on illegal immigration from the Caribbean. But the fears are mounting as these persons from the Caribbean are waiting anxiously to hear what immigration plans will be implemented and how they'll be effective. This evening, we will speak with renowned immigration attorney Wayne Golding, who has in the past helped to return Caribbean nationals to the United States after they were found to have been illegally removed. Good evening, Mr. Golding. Thank you for joining us. What is the extent of the power of the President of the United States to make immigration laws?
The President of the United States doesn't have the power by himself to make any law. He can execute some executive orders which control operational aspects of the law. For example, as people might have well known, President Obama signed some executive orders that were challenged eventually, but one such order was the Deferred Action for Early Childhood Arrivals, called the DACA, which basically laid out a procedure for children who came here under a certain age without proper immigration paperwork to be able to get work permits and to continue their education. But it's an executive order that can be repealed, and that's one of the aspects of what the president can do. However, the president's agenda, if he has support in Congress and the Senate, can be carried through in the form of the Congress and the Senate actually proposing laws to be enacted after a vote, of course. And, of course, everyone knows this president has the majority in both the Congress and the Senate. And so his policies will be reflected by the laws they make and push forward. And then ultimately the president will sign those laws, or he can also veto the laws. But it's very doubtful what is going to happen in terms of him rubber stamping whatever comes to him from Congress or the Senate, because it's a fully Republican-controlled body of the government now.
What does it mean being there's a fully Republican-controlled government? Does this mean laws can be passed more easily?
Absolutely, absolutely. It will be very easy, because usually there's debate, there's a vote, and sometimes, you know, lawmakers will want adjustments before it's written into a final draft to be sent to the president. But in this case, because of the majority control of the Republican Senate and Congress, we see them acquiescing to the president's agenda, because it's very unusual to see a president with a majority in both houses can't get his policies through, or will have some problem with a law that's sent to him from his own people.
And what is the current law on who is eligible for deportation?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's so funny, because the current state of the law, really, the teeth in this law really was solidified back in 1996 when President Clinton was in power. And there was this anti-crime drive in the United States, and we had a Democratic president and an Attorney General, Janet Reno, at the time. And they enacted a lot of new laws in 1996, which we're seeing the effects of now as regarding to deportation, criminal violations that lead to deportation. So we are in an age where we're seeing the law catch up to the times, so to speak. So, you know, the legislation that's out there right now, the proposed legislation, is to make these laws even tougher. But I can tell you this, even if they don't make new legislation to make the laws tougher, the state of the law right now puts people in peril because of the level of enforcement that there is, you know, that's available now. And that is why you're seeing more people being deported, more people being caught up in the system after violating the immigration law, because they have now more resources to deal with that. And with the rise in terrorism and all of these concerns, they're pushing even more to have criminal violators be deported. So I think we're going to see even more of a stringent enforcement, not necessarily new laws, but more enforcement.
And Mr. Golding, how different were things under the Obama administration?
It's ironic because under President Obama, more people were deported than under the last three presidents before him. And it's not that he went out to do it, but because the resources were there and the concentration was more on criminal violators that we saw an extreme rise in deportation. But the compassionate part of immigration really has to do with, those people who are here without paperwork. They have not committed any crimes. They've been here for years. But for one reason or the other, they can't adjust their status to become permanent residents. Or they have children who came here at an early age, 1, 2, 3, before 16, not through any fault of their own, but they cannot adjust their status. And they're looking at the possibility of being removed to countries that they know nothing about. And we are extremely concerned about the level of enforcement which will be moved to this particular area.
Mr. Gordon, do you think Mr. Trump was deliberate in not saying much about Caribbean immigration?
I don't think he was deliberate. I think he laser focused on Mexicans per se. However, what affects the Mexicans will affect us because immigration laws, although they can be discriminatory in some sense, the way it's structured right now, if they start certain policies against illegal immigrants from Mexico, the same thing will apply to illegal immigrants from the Caribbean. And sometimes that's what we don't realize. And that's why I give a lot of credit to the Hispanics because they have been able, even under the Obama administration and prior to rally themselves as a group to have some sort of standing to speak on these issues and to influence these issues. And as a Caribbean people in general, not as individuals, because we do have Caribbean people who are very outspoken and active, but as a group, we're not as vocal as the Hispanics are. So we sort of benefit from some of the hard work that some of these groups have done in the past. So one of the things that I've seen, though, since this last election campaign is that the Caribbean community in general has been even motivated even more. They've been motivated even more to get involved in the process. So now we're seeing our Caribbean folks running for political office. They're being elected as judges. They're playing much more of a role in the system now that can influence the future of their group as a people.
Mr. Golding, how easily is it for an illegal foreign national in the U.S. to adjust their status?
Well, there are so many aspects to it. It's good for some people and bad for some people. The reason I say that is, for example, if somebody crossed the border without being inspected and they came here and they've lived here for years and say they get married, for example, to a United States citizen, they would have to leave the country in order to get their immigration documents if that person files for them. However, they might be subjected to a 3 or 10-year ban from coming into the country. One of the things President Obama had signed into action was what they call a waiver of unlawful presence, where they would allow you to apply for a waiver so you could go out and come back in after you get your paperwork at the embassy in the country you came from. I know especially for people from the Caribbean, they're familiar with the term people coming home and getting stuck. That was the reason people were coming home, doing their interview, and finding out that they have a ban and they can't go back. President Obama sought to cure that part by allowing people to get a waiver. On the other hand, there are also people who are placed in deportation because they came into the country or overstayed their time then, for example. They had a visa and overstayed their time. There are ways for those people to adjust in the courts to actually get a green card through the court, but they have to be put into deportation proceedings before. So it all depends on the person's circumstances. You can have somebody who came last year and fall into an illegal status, but they can get their paperwork because they get married to a U.S. citizen. It's a valid marriage. or you can have somebody who came here 25 years ago, but they crossed the border illegally, or they committed some criminal offense that actually prevents them from getting immigration paperwork. So it all depends.
Mr. Golding, what grounds are there for persons deported to re-enter the U.S.?
Well, then again, it depends. There are some offenses for which people are deported that makes them permanently barred from entering the United States. And most of those fall under the categories of if they have committed an aggravated felony. There are certain types of criminal behavior, criminal convictions that are aggravated felony. It ranges from theft of over 10,000 or more, to murder, to rape, to child abuse, to robbery. You know, there are a plethora of things that are aggravated felony that will forever bar you from coming into the United States. There are other offenses, however, that bar you from being admitted for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. But even with those offenses, you have to get a waiver or permission from the Attorney General to come back into the country. So there's a process still. Even if you get a ban of 5 or 10 years, there is a process for approval to come back in. So there are some who have been also illegally deported. For example, we did some cases a year or so ago, some persons who we found out they were deported during a time when they were actually United States citizens. And the reason they became citizens, not because they took any affirmative action on their part to file for it, but because their parents had become United States citizens before they had turned the age of 18. So you're automatically endowed under most circumstances with citizenship. And we were able to bring back those people into the United States. So there are several factors that go into each case, and each case is an individual set of facts and circumstances. So we don't use a broad brush to say everybody who gets deported for a certain offense can come back. But we know those who are deported for aggravated felonies cannot come back under the rules, current rules.
Mr. Golding, thank you very much for joining us. And that was Mr. Wayne Golding, immigration attorney in Florida in the United States. That's all for In Depth. We were just discussing Donald Trump's immigration policies and how it will affect Caribbean nationals.